Who was a bad guy in history who actually wasn't a bad guy?
Richard Jewell, initially lauded as a hero and a brave man who ran towards the bomb to help, then the FBI and media turned on him and accused him of doing the bombing himself, because he was actually just as outlandishly brave and ran toward the bomb to help people. They took his truck for evidence. He had to go into hiding, made a villain by incompetent people. For years, finally exonerated and dies shortly afterward.
That woman who was accused of kidnapping children because her kids didn't have her DNA, but in fact her had different DNA than the rest of her body.
William Thomas Green Morton died broke defending his discovery of anesthesia. He was a dentist and didn't get much respect from the doctors at the time. IMO, one of the most important medical discoveries.
In the film Titanic, the character Murdoch killed someone, took bribes and generally came across as a right. He was a real-life person who was actually a hero and saved many lives. His living relatives were so disgusted that the VP of Fox travelled to Dalbeattie to personally apologise and presented a £5,000 donation to Dalbeattie High School to boost the school's William Murdoch Memorial Prize.
Richard Jewell, security guard at the Atlanta Olympic who was blamed for the bombing.
In Braveheart, William Wallace gets betrayed by Robert the Bruce, which never happened. He was loyal to the end.
Captain Hazelwood of the Exxon Valdez. He is often pictured on the helm of the Exxon swaying drunkenly going full throttle into the reef talking like what actually happened. Valdez's critical navigation equipment was out of commission. Faxes sent to Exxon and Exxon told them to sail guard budget cuts removed vessel tracking in the area. Green and tired crew was on duty. Request was made to relief crew. It was denied. XO, who was on con at the time, was inexperienced on the passage and neither requested pilotage. While Hazelwood did drink that day, he was not in command of the con at the time and was in his quarters resting. Hazelwood made a comment that he needed it because of how upset he was over the situation. Exxon's PR paid off the media to blame Hazelwood. However, Hazelwood was charged with only one charge, which was for pollution. He proved he was not a drunkard and retained his captain's license, even getting offers to sail again, which he turned down. The real villains are mass media, false news, and comedians, but Exxon's PR spending power to keep the blame off them. Hazelwood passed away last year after the ANNV of the spill. Random fact: the Valdez sailed until 2008 under different name Oriental Nicety.
A dingo really ate her baby.
The McDonald's coffee lady, the woman who sued McDonald's after she spilled coffee on her lap, received third-degree burns in her pelvic area. She was hospitalized for 8 days and required a couple years of media jumped on the story, making it a poster case for frivolous corrected typos.
Pharaoh Cleopatra. She was actually a pretty good ruler, with her focusing more on her nation than just abusing her position for her own benefit. There's even some records saying that she wasn't even all that beautiful. She was, however, very intelligent, with stuff like how she learned around 10 different languages.
Murdoch, on the Titanic. Dude went down saving lives. Cameron needlessly made him corrupt. Then, apologized, by paying $5,000 to the guy's village, or I don't know why I wrote Captain. The guy that Winzelt's fiancée tried to bribe to make room for him on the boat. Yay, he was nothing like that. One to pocket money, that is. He stayed till the end. Swell did APOLIGIZE and pay. If he'd done nothing wrong, why would he?
Niccolò Machiavelli. Machiavelli didn't invent the idea of lying or ruthlessness. He made an observation about what worked and tried to get a new gig. Now his name is synonymous with heartless manipulator.
The bad guy, Razor Ramon.
Machiavelli, one of the most honest dudes in history, and his name is instead synonymous with villainy.
Tom the Cat. Jerry is a menace.
Nander the Relentless.
Jesus was given vinegar to drink by the Roman. It turns out that the Roman military provided their troops with a water, vinegar mixture to drink because it helped them replenish their salt levels after perspiring. So, the only thing the Roman did was to offer Jesus a sip of his own drink rather than making him drink vinegar as punishment or a dig.
Roscoe, Fatty, Arbuckle.
A lot of Tudor women come to mind: Catherine Howard, Mary Tudor and Anne Boleyn. Catherine was sexually abused her entire life, only for Thomas Culpeper to use it to blackmail and assault her. Almost every man in her life abused or used her, and she died a teenage girl. After her death, people made up about her wanting to be married to a and blackmailer. She was a child. Mary Tudor was horrifically abused by her own father, torn from her mother and prevented from seeing her, even as she was dying, and went on to be demonized way more heavily than her father, who was a tyrant. Mary tried her best with what she had. After her father divorced her mother, she lived with the constant threat of assassination or execution. Her own father was willing to her. Anne Boleyn was not a seductress who tried to steal the king. She did not want the king, and initially flirted with him to get back at a guy who courted and ditched her. She only agreed to marry Henry because she had to. Even before he met Anne, he was looking for a way to end his marriage to Catherine d'Aragon. Why? Because the only reason they were Marie was to preserve an alliance with Spain, and that fell through and she didn't have a son. None of which was Catalina's fault. Nor was Anne's. Anne Boleyn never wore yellow during the time of mourning for Catalina. Anne didn't abuse Mary. Henry did.
Hades. He barely cheated on his wife and was only kidnapped Persephone because Zeus told him a good doesn't cause death, only what happens. He named his dog Spot. Always act like he's evil and malicious. But in all reality, he's a sweet guy.
I did close to 25 years. In prison for something I never did. Friends and family all gone. I survived it all. Life can but one can endure, it seems, without losing your mind if you're lucky. If you wish to call that lucky.
Monica Lewinsky.
That woman who spilled McDonald's coffee on her lap.
Milli Vanilli. One committed suicide for being hired in a music industry lip-syncing travesty that's basically now commonplace. The real villain is the record. Not enough of y'all commenting realize that Frank Farian is to blame for hiring them in the first place. Rob and Fab could have been anyone. Farian orchestrated. Rob and Fab. I was wrong to say suicide. I apologize for that. My memory isn't what it used to be. Rob's death may not have been directly from the scandal, but I don't think it's a stretch to say the two events are intertwined.
Sinead OConnor.
And the award for the most dangerous question of the day goes.
Anyone that is familiar with the movie 300 is aware of how it sanitizes the Spartans and how it demonizes the First Persian. Reality is that the First Persian Empire, or the Achaemenid Empire, was pretty forward-thinking for the era. This is the empire that freed the Jews from the Babylonians and gave the world the Cyrus Cylinder, which some regard as the first bill for Sparta. It was a militaristic society based on social Darwinism, centuries before the birth of Charles Darwin, and it had a greater percentage of slaves than Persia ever. I am not suggesting that the First Persian Empire was perfect. I am just pointing out the historically inaccurate and racist portrayal of Persia in the movie 300.
Richard III. Demonized by the Tudors, in part due to his curved spine, now confirmed, and their political agendas. He might have been a good king or a bad person, but it is difficult to determine as the records that followed his death are so incredibly biased.
John Brown, fighting to end slavery will always be based.
Herbert He was a lifelong humanitarian and had a reputation as an excellent administrator, which led him to win the presidency of the IN. But less than 8 months after he took office, the world was rocked by one of the worst economic depressions in history. It was also during Hoover's presidency that mass media like radio and newsreels started spreading wildly, and Hoover was a breathtakingly awful speaker with poor public relations. Hoover got trounced in the next election by FDR's abundant optimism and wide-toothy grin, and was forever tarred in history as being the uncaring, standoffish bureaucrat who ignored all the hardships of the Great Depression from his White House perch.
Germany has left the chat.
This very website almost did the same to someone after the Boston Marathon bombing. Edit. Sick of individual replies to people who comment before reading the thread. Sunil Tripathy was already missing for a month by the time of the bombing. He was found several days later in a river, having died by suicide. They have never definitively said whether he was even still alive by the time of the bombing. Yes, he did commit suicide, but saying it was a direct result is speculation. Has this website not hurt his family enough without you people passing off rumors as fact?
Lydia Fairchild. She has chimerism, so her has different DNA from the rest of her body, the DNA of her absorbed twin.
Anesthesia is arguably the most important medical discovery in history. Modern surgery is literally impossible without it.
That movie's initial gross was over. Donating £5,000 is like the average US man giving them a dime and saying my bad.
He was mocked for moving in his with mother. He and his mum did an interview on Oprah some time later. They said it was because his mum was sick and he was taking care of her. It's really not that uncommon for middle-aged people to move in with aging parents. BTW, his mum is still alive last I checked. She is still friends with his lawyer and their children. She is apparently a very nice woman.